Hello everyone, welcome to Java Talent. Today we are going to cover the Spring Boot caching mechanism. This is the simple basic program in Spring Boot that implement the caching. How we can increase the performance of the applications uh, by using this caching mechanisms in Spring Boot. So basically, the caching is the part of temporary memory. We are holding the data for sometimes like in between the application and the persistence layer. So for example, if we are hitting the repeatedly data the same value, and if we are getting a same response, so in place of directly hitting to the database, we can just get it to the cache, and then from then for the next step we can just get it from the cache. Why we are using this cache? Because that it makes the faster and less expensive, it improves the performance, it gives the response time quickly, and then the database access also, like it will be always faster when we are fetching the data from the database. And it costs the backend request also, like if we are hitting the same data multiple times, it will be like multiple requests. So there is a lots of caching types, like in-memory caching, database caching, web server caching, CDN caching. So I'm just going to Hibernate first level cache is an examples for our database caching. So for today example, I'm just going to demonstrate that as like the following annotation. What are the following annotations we have to use? Like enable caching, our annotations which we will use in these applications. So let's go to this applications first. What are the dependency we have to use? So I have just imported one simple project. You can just create it using like a Spring Initializer tool, or whatever the method you are preferring. You can just create a simple Java Spring Boot applications. So here the dependency what I have used it is one dependency is that for the cache Spring Boot starter cache. One dependency I am going to use this RESTful web services. So a starter web dependency, and as I'm going to use the JPA Spring Boot data JPA, so that's why it is Spring Boot data starter JPA. And then MySQL I'm going to use in this today video tutorial. So this is the four dependency which we have to use basically. So one is for cache, another one is for making our application as RESTful web services, and then another one is like when we are using this Spring Data JPA, and then the MySQL for the database connections. Okay, so let's see that like what are the details you have to configure in your class. So in application.properties file, I am just using this. You can just ignore the first one because it is just to mention the application name. This server.port, it will change the port number from 8080 to 8082. Why I'm using this 8082? Because 8080 is running for my Oracle database in my laptop, so that's why it has been changed. Otherwise you can just use, if you don't use it will take 8080, but yeah, if that port is used by another application, so you will get the error. These are the database configurations for MySQL. We have to provide the database URL, and this is the schema name Java Talent, which we will use in our MySQL. And this is the driver name. This is the username, password, MySQL delete, and DDL auto generations. Hibernate DDL auto update. There is the multiple value. If you just press Control L, so you can see that what are the value it will be there. There will be like update, and this is the show SQL, so it will show the SQL onto your console. And the application which I have just created, it is very simple applications. I will go one by one. So first I can come to our main application. So if you see that this is the default main class which we help create when we are creating the application. So here I am using this @enable caching annotations. So this is the class level annotation which is used to enable the caching in my Spring Boot application. By default it set up a cache manager for us, and it will create the in-memory caching using the concurrent hash map. Okay, so it will be it is also applied the Spring Boot configurations class, configuration enable caching from this any class which you want to make a configurations class from. There also you can define it. So here I'm using this in main class only. And then if I can go one by one, repository layer and then all the way, so you can see the model class which I'm using is simple employee. employee class here. So you can see that the entity and these are the annotations which we have to use for our getter, setter, null. So three fields I am taking: id as integer, name as a string which can be nullable. So these two fields I am not making an nullable here. If you see that nullable is false, that means it will be a mandatory field, id and name. And then address I am taking as nullable, which is maybe you can pass it or not. Then I'm going to that first I'm coming to the dow layer. So you can see here, like this is the employee repository which I have created by extending that jpa repository, and here we have to provide the model class, which model class we are using, and the id of that class, type of id basically. And this is the repository annotations which we have to use. If I go to that service layer, so this is the service layer, and then you can see that employee service I have created is in this that annotation service. You can go to my previous video if you want more details to that annotations. Here I am injecting that repository class at the red auto wire employee repository, and then if you see, there is the lots of method I have created. One method I am creating here is save employee method, and it will save the records. It will be a post call basically. For that I'm not taking any uh, I'm not making any cacheable or anything, cacheable put or everything. So there is the multiple annotations for the caching. So you know that, like at the rate cacheable is the annotations, which is it is the method level annotation which is used to method whose response to be cached. For example, the response which I want to be cache, so for that I can use that at the rate cacheable. So I'm just wanting to get this get employee by method call, which I will call from the controller layer, and then that method call I just wanted to be cache. So that's why here I'm using this at the rate cacheable. The value which I am going to use is employee, and the key is id. For that id I'm going to take that as the cache value. So now from the repository you can see that I'm calling that find by. There is the lots of method when we are just extracting this extending this jpa repository. There is a lots of method that you can explore. So here I'm using that find by id method, which will give us the response as employee object by passing the id value. And cache put. So this is the cache put. uh, Means when we are going to update, like so put method basically it will be using here. So when we are going to update that employee value, so that in that case this method will be used. This is the also the method level annotations, like it will update. It is used to update the value and the cache before invoking the method. By doing this, we can just get the result in the put in the cache, and the method will be executed. It has the same attributes of cacheable annotations, like the same id and then what I want. And cache evict is the method level annotations which is used to remove the data from the database. Not the database, basically it is remove the data from the cache. Basically when we are this method is called, then the annotations, when we are calling this method, the method executed and the cache will be removed or evicted. So we can remove single entry from the cache based on the key attribute pair, like, or if you want you can just remove all the entries basically. So that's where you can do that. Okay, so now let's start the applications one by one. So if you see here, these are the methods which I am calling. If I am going to the controller layer, here I have just injected that service class, and I'm giving that request mapping as employees here slash employees, and making this class as at the controller class because this is my controller. So you can see that the same method I am using as post call, and I'm just returning that response entity of by putting that as our response what I am getting into the service layer of the employee object, and then making the HTTP status as created because this is the same method. Similar way I am updating that value, so I am making that as status call as okay by request body. I'm here passing the body of that employee class object, and then this is the get mapping what I was telling. Here I am calling the get employee by add-in method. So if you see that here I am calling that method, and from this service layer it will be making a cache. So like these are the one more delete mapping where, so when we are deleting that uh, value, so in that case it will go and take the value. So let's run the application and see. I'm just showing you from the back end of this one. So you can see that schema is like ready. Java talent. So there is no any table employee. It will create the table when you run your application first time. I will show the query also. So apart from that, there is nothing else I have done. So just you can run the application and see what are the responses what I want to show you. So like first call, it will make a database call and get the data from database, and in the second time onwards it will get the value from cache itself. So all the MySQL configurations you can see here, and if you go a little bit down, okay, so you can see Hibernate call, it is the one line statement here. Create table employee, whatever the value field we have given. So primary key is ID, which is you can see like ID integer not null auto increment, and the address varchar, which is nullable because there is nothing anything not null mentioned, and you can see that the name varchar 255 character which is not null, and the primary key is ID. So okay, so let's go to that postman, and I'm just going to put one value into the database. So you can if you see the schema, if you refresh my schema here for the Java talent, you can see that table is being created over here, but there is no any records. Okay, so structure is ready, right? ID, address and name structure is ready, but there is no any records. So now I'm going to do one post call. So you can see our REST endpoint is uh, request mapping is like at the rate slash employees and then save method. So if I can go down there, here I am providing that employees at 082, I am running that port itself. So that's the port. You can, if you are running into 8080, you can make it as 8080. This is the method call I am going to do, and this is the name of Java talent. Okay, and the address, make it as Delhi, because the ID field will be auto generated, so it will generate the value for you. So if you hit this endpoint, it will generate the value. See, response I'm getting ID as 1, name as Java talent, address is Delhi, and the status code you can see here is 201, which we have just given in our successful scenario when the database has been inserted to the database. Let me insert one more record. Hyderabad. Okay, and I will show you the response. Here two records which we have created. If you go to the console, you can see there is the two records call. So one is save the call, and means you can see this statement which we are printing from our service. See, first we are printing, that's why it is printed first, and then the SQL query is showing over here. So if you want to see here like two call which we have made in our save call. So if you go to that database, you can most probably see the both the records into your database basically. Now I just wanted to make a get request. So for example, so uh, employee number 1 is there into our database, so I'm going to make it as one call. So see, first record was with the ID is Java talent, which is address is Delhi. I'm getting the response 200, okay, because that's the response which we are expecting here. Now if you go to your console, you mostly see that the value is calling the database. You can see the SQL script which is printing here onto the console that makes the call is being from database. But if you go ahead once again make this same call with the one ID, see, I am getting the response, but what happened in the backend, it will not call the database. See, there is no any additional select statement has been printed. That means what it is doing is it is taking that same query with the ID 1 which we have just called with this cacheable method. It will be getting that response from the cache and getting here in the response. but it is not making a database call. For example, if you go ahead and then make a second call with the id 2, it will take that value from the database and make a call. See, get the record with id 2. The second call will happen again. If you make the same request, it will not go to database, it will print it from the cache. So this is the cache concept. Basically, if we are repeatedly, we are not making a call to the database, and there is the lots of in-memory data structure like Redis, which is a key store based data structure which is used in the persisting the database, and that you can use. So use like there is the modes, caffeine is there, simple is there. So means there is a lot of caching pattern that which we can use in our means if you use that caching library, there is a lots of functionality you will achieve. So that's all for today's sessions.